Oh.
Okay. I think yep. Okay, we're live. And the mic's on. Good. Okay, hi everyone. Welcome to class 4 of our weekly economics course series. I know some of you watch online and some of you are here in the room and you're used to me giving you introductions. Well, hi. I think a lot of people are reeling back from whatever it was these last 4 days was with the DNC and the so-called convention, where Kamala Harris gave the most boring, uncharismatic, bloodthirsty speech. Oh, sorry, we're not starting soon. We've already started. There we go. And also, if people want to stay up to date on what's going on, they can go to eir.news. That'll be scrolling throughout the entire bottom class. All right, so the DNC convention ended with Kamala Harris promising that we will have the most lethal army of the world, and we will continue our promise to do so. She was completely uncharismatic, boring. She tried to pay some homage to or lip service to the Palestinian plight, there were uncommitted delegates. People may remember earlier in the year there were people who had a movement in Michigan and in other states where they needed to vote uncommitted. So instead of casting their vote for Biden, who was going to be the presumptive nominee, they were going to vote for uncommitted. And they won some delegates, and they were invited to the DNC. And as we found out, this movement actually really had no bite to it, because their intention all along was to endorse Kamala Harris, on the one caveat that they had a Palestinian speaker come on the stage and speak at the DNC. What a fraud that was. What a joke that was, because they wouldn't even give them that. And I read the speech of one of the proposed Palestinian speakers, and it wasn't even that good. It was just saying, let's hope that Kamala Harris will call for a ceasefire. Kamala Harris said that she's working around the clock with Biden to try and stop or try and getting a ceasefire. When we know from history that all it takes is one call from the president to the prime minister of Israel saying, if you don't stop, we are going to stop sending you arms and weapons. And of course, the agenda of the Democrats is war, war, and more war. Whether it's in Gaza, whether it's in Ukraine, or whether it's in the other 53 places where there's currently an active war zone, that is what your economy is tied to right now. Just straight up war. But our campaign has recently launched a conception of the military, retooling our military-industrial complex, not one that is rooted in violence or weapons or killing or destruction, but one that is rooted in development. This is something that President Kennedy, back in 1962, had conceptualized when he gave a speech at West Point, where he said that to the graduates of West Point that many of them will be involved in conversations in regards to ceasefires. They'll be involved in high-level political talks about the restructuring of countries. That some of them will be reaching out into the farthest reaches of space, which that alone, by the way, shows that Kennedy actually believed that those graduates would be in places like Mars by the time they were 40 years old. That's just the orientation of the country at the time, 1962, 6-7 years before we actually had a man on the moon. This is what Kennedy's conception of the graduates of West Point was. The non-military principles that they will have to take with them, not the confrontational violent ones. So today, we need to ask ourselves, what is the point of a military? Is it to just enforce this bloody, rules-based order around the world? Or can it be actually a symbol of hope? To be a symbol of what the United States preaches when it's equality and justice? Can we actually redefine our communities through a Space Civilian Conservation Corps, a modern-day CCC program, where young people of the Bronx are working with the Army Corps of Engineers to rapidly industrialize and reindustrialize areas like the Bronx? And what exactly would that look like? And so today, everybody is caught up in this idea of, we don't actually need to think anymore. We don't need to industrialize anymore. AI is just going to do everything for us. Well, will it really? I mean, AI makes a lot of the decisions now in terms of military. We know that there are reports that in Israel, people's lives and where drones are decided to be stricken are decided by AI. Does this mean that AI will be used in future city planning as well? Do we get rid of the human element? Do we just let computers run our society and our future? And that's the topic today. So I'll just end it there and pass it off to Jason. So go ahead, Jason.
All right. Well, thank you, Jose. Happy to be here again. Yeah, I want to talk about let's take an example of the way China has essentially totally eliminated deep poverty within that country. So over a period of one generation, instead of hundreds of millions of people in poverty, there is basically nobody in poverty in China anymore. An amazing success. Now, I contrast the way that they did that with a lot of what passes for, progressive economics in the United States today. A lot of people seem to think that there is enough wealth and that if we just distribute it better, we'll be okay. There's a few very wealthy individuals, Wall Street, they've got too much money, they do. But that if we just sort of move that around, that's how we could get rid of poverty, we could improve things. And what this misses is the whole question of how do you produce? So how do you go after poverty, not inequality? How do you make sure there's enough? And why do things like saying if we gave everybody a minimum wage of $50 an hour doesn't do much? You gotta create, you gotta produce. So let's take a look at this chart again from last time of human population. Take a look at the whole world later. Go ahead to the population. So again, just reflecting on what we talked about the past couple times here about how human population has grown tremendously in a way that no animal species has done. So next, you just keep it black. So the success economically of a business, I'm not using any slide right now. You can just, thanks. If you take a look at economics, people often think in terms of individual businesses. If you add up, each of the businesses, you get the whole economy. Let's talk about what goes into the success of a business. What are some of the things that determine whether a business makes it or if it fails? Any thoughts?
Overhead expenses. Expenses and profit.
Okay, profits and expenses. So that's based on like their sales and their cost of getting those things. What things would impact that about a business that aren't things it can do directly? Let me phrase it differently. That was kind of weird. If you took a business and you moved it somewhere else in the world, how would that change how productive it is?
Shipping costs.
Okay, shipping. So if you're like a manufacturing company and you're near people who want to buy your things, that's helpful. What determines shipping costs?
Oh, I was going to say it depends on what the business makes.
It's true.
Right, because like if they make, I don't know, winter jackets, but they're in like Ecuador or something, right?
Right.
Then what,
they're going to have a lot of shipping costs because the only people that are buying it are going to be, far away.
Yeah.
Right. Good point. So what determines shipping costs? What are some things that then change how much it costs to move things around?
Infrastructure.
Okay, roads. If UPS trucks are all in terrible traffic and it takes forever to get anywhere, that's going to raise the cost. Other forms of infrastructure. Do we have rail, for example? Do we have high-speed rail? What else? What else that's out that would have happened if you moved a business from one place to another?
Well, the stock for the people that are going to work there, like where they're going to live. Is there water? Is there sanitation? Is there healthcare?
Right. How about your workforce? How about educating your workforce? Not every business is going to, raises, babies into adults to become workers, right? So there's the educational system, healthcare. Do you have a healthy workforce? These are all things that are outside the individual business. And Lyndon LaRouche was really insistent that, especially considering how underdeveloped American infrastructure is, that really infrastructure spending should be about half of the economic activity in the United States. Half, at least for now. That's a lot. What could we do if we had such a commitment? What kind of projects would you like to see?
High speed rail.
High speed rail, okay.
Extended subways.
Extended subways. Yeah.
Nuclear power plants.
Nuclear power plants, all right. Yeah.
Geothermal.
Geothermal, okay, we can build it all right. Yeah, so transportation's a big thing. Think about healthcare as infrastructure. Do we have enough health facilities right now and access to them.
We don't have access. No access.
So, you think about what it would do if you change these factors. And you think about, like, for example, what has China done? How did China become so much more productive? How did China eliminate poverty? How did they make sure that they were able to produce enough for everybody? One of the things they invested extremely heavily in was infrastructure. They've got a huge high-speed rail network, all built in the last generation. They got out of energy poverty. I mean, just 10 years ago, the electricity per person in China, or 15 years ago, a dozen years ago, per capita electricity use in China was only half of what it is today. In a dozen years, they've doubled the electricity use per person. What impact does that have? What can you do if you double the electricity per person?
I mean, the healthcare facilities you do have, are going to have, you're going to have way fewer people coming in because of basic sanitation issues. If people have enough energy to have clean water,
Yeah.
then you don't need as, if you attack the healthcare problem from the demand side as well as the supply side, you might say.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's electricity. This isn't just people using it in their apartments. This isn't having a TV or like keeping the heater on at a higher temperature to be comfortable in the winter. This is going into things like you're saying, water treatment, wastewater treatment. That's having a huge health impact. Also, that electricity went into factories, production. How many people do you know, think about this in your daily life, who have jobs where they physically produce something besides food? Does anybody have any examples of that? People that you know, just your family or close friends? Anybody in this room? Okay, so if none of us know anybody who makes anything, where did it all come from?
Okay, sometimes we have to maybe improve our home or make our own furniture that needs power tools, which is power, electricity. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't know anybody who makes, I don't personally know people who make their own furniture. All right. Okay, so furniture. Okay, so we got furniture covered, but for everything else that all of us in this room need, none of us know anybody who's making it. But I see that none of us are naked. We're all wearing clothes. We're presumably eating. We got, beds and so forth. Yeah.
I have to rewire my e-bike once in a while.
Okay. All right. So that's good. Some repair.
But you didn't make the e-bike.
Also, I made it originally, but now I have to rewire it once in a while.
So if we think about that, where the productivity is coming from, how are you going to lift living standards in the U.S. without figuring out how to make more of those things that people living in poverty need more of? Who's going to make it? Right? That's the biggest challenge. So let's take a couple of pictures to take a look at infrastructure and how this changes the economic potential. So go ahead, Jose, to that first map, please. Great. I don't know if you can read this. It says rates of travel in 1800, rates of travel in 1830. This is a map that I think the Census Bureau put together some time ago, showing from New York how many days it would take to get to different areas. So for example, this thick black line here, this is how far you could get in 1 week in 1880.
1800.
Thank you, 1800. 1830, here's the 1 week line. You can see the other ones.
Can you do it again?
Yeah. So
that's 1 week.
Yeah, this is how far you could get. You can reach all this area in 1 week from New York. 30 years later, you can reach this whole region in 1 week, starting from New York. And you can see it heads out, 4, 5, 6, 4, 5, 6. What happened? What specifically happened? What changed?
Rail.
A little early for that. There's something else, an earlier form of transportation that really opened this up. Canals. Water. Yeah. The great thing about water is that you don't have to pave it or cut down. It's just, it's, unless there's rapids and things, it's, it sort of takes care of itself. It's its own roadway built by nature. So you can see how the huge change from here to, you're able to come all this way in a week, you're going along a river. Look at the further places though. So 4, 5, 6 weeks. 4, 5, 6 weeks. Much change? I mean,
It's relatively the same in relation to the outer boundary.
yeah, like if you're going from 4 weeks to 6 weeks, it's not like it's not a big difference in 1830 because you actually have to build the infrastructure in a specific place. There aren't any airplanes, or you can just fly wherever you want. Next. 1857. Here's the 1 week line. What happened now? Yeah. Very specifically, rail happened. Roads too, but rail's the big transformation here. So you can take a train, get anywhere in this whole region in a day. That would have taken. That's very similar to the 1 week region, just a couple generations before. Imagine living through that. Places that would take you a week to get to, and now you can get there in 1 day. Mm-hmm. So, what's the economic impact of this? It's nice you can go visit your friends quicker, but how does this change the whole country's economy?
Manufacture. They can, through logistics, ship quicker.
You can get things somewhere quicker. Mm-hmm. And what is that? So does that affect what we're able to produce, or how does that change the kinds of things we can produce? Is there a way it has an impact on that too?
In fact, you can buy cheaper land farther away and put the manufacturing plant there.
Okay, that's true.
You have cheaper labor there too.
You've opened up new areas where you can say, hey, because you're able to actually ship your things from here, now this is a place that you can set up your factory, not just right along the river like it used to be. Now you can put it anywhere along this rail line. The other thing, if you're able to move things really quickly, you can have more specialized manufacturing. So you say, okay, I'm going to make these pieces, and then they're going to go here, and then this factory is going to put them together, and then they're going to ship it over here, and then they're going to put this together. So instead of doing everything in one shop under one roof, with the development of rail and so forth, you got more specialization in industry as well. So another way to improve productivity. Next picture. Okay, and then here's 1930. Let's switch back and forth. Go back one, 1857. All right. So the furthest was about 6 weeks out here. And then 1930. Next one. Right. 1 day, 2 days, 3 days. Now we got rail all around the country. More rail than we have today. 100 years ago. Yeah. So, all right, good. Now, the next question I want to bring up is just to take another look at energy, which we talked about last time. But go ahead to the next slide, Jose. So this is what I had mentioned about, this is U.S. per person electricity generation. First year here is 1985. So what's happened to electricity use per person in the U.S. since 1985?
In a rip-roaring plateau.
That's right. It hasn't really changed very much, has it? Pretty much the same for 40 years. What about China? And this isn't one of these cheesy charts that starts at a funny number. This is 0 down here. Okay. So, let's say around 1995, we're at 1,000. Today we're at 6,000. So 6 times more energy over 30 years. Amazing. Next slide.
And 6 times more energy from electricity.
Yes, thank you. 6 times more electricity.
Probably far greater than that in general.
Yeah, the overall increase of energy was even bigger. Yeah, good point. So this is a chart I want to revisit that shows over U.S. history how much power we had per person and what kind of power it was. And we talked last week about how at first we had wood, and then we started using coal instead because there's only so many trees. Coal is denser, higher energy per wagon load or ton or whatnot. So coal is definitely an improvement. Oil and natural gas became used much more than coal because you can't pump coal through a hose, either filling up your tank or squirting it into your engine. So these liquid fuels are better. They're also cleaner and denser. This little thing red is nuclear fission. This is our nuclear plants in the US. Very, very little. You can see here a shadow of what was proposed back in the Kennedy administration in the 1960s for what they expected nuclear to be as a portion of the US energy supply. And then the yellow added on is what we might have with fusion. So we didn't have anything like this. We sort of stayed put. Is it because we've reached a high enough state of development that we don't need to grow anymore? No. I don't think so. Do we realize growth is bad and we just shouldn't do it anymore? I mean, what's behind this? So what happened? Why did this change happen? Where did it plateau? About 1970, late 60s, 1970, early 70s. What happened?
Well, there was an oil crisis around then, right? There was, they said they hit like peak oil or something.
That may be the first time they'd said it, hearing about this. There have been oil crises, so this, that shows it smoothed out, but definitely they were for political reasons. But that, we've got plenty of hydrocarbons from the U.S. domestically right now. So why is it still so low? What happened 50 years ago?
Powell Memorandum.
Gone?
The Powell Memorandum. It's when the businesses ganged up and decided that they had to do something about this excess of democracy. And from then on, then wages were never rose again. From 1971 and 1973 or something, it never went up again.
One big thing that happened in 71, one thing is we're looking at, after the Kennedy assassination. So not just his specific policies, but even actually having representative government, because people knew that the story about Kennedy wasn't true. People knew it wasn't just leave our unsolved. So one thing is socially, you're living in a country where you're saying who is running the government if it's not the president or the Congress. Who's actually running this place? So that's a huge impact. You also had the environmentalist movement, which, yes, clean air and water are good, but what came with that in that specific historical period was there's too many people. We need to have zero population growth, negative population growth. The third world shouldn't develop so fast. That occurred at that time. And in 71, Nixon ended the Bretton Woods fixed exchange rate, the gold standard, something that LaRouche had warned about at the time. So there was a whole paradigm shift. And we've been living in really a flatlined country since then, living off of the investments made by our parents, grandparents, great-grandparents, great-great-grandparents' generations, just eating it up and not replacing it for those who are coming. So let's think about how we make new platforms. What goes into having made that history of being able to use coal? What made coal useful? That's the other question. We talk about why coal is better than wood, but what made it possible to start using coal instead of wood? Why didn't this happen 500 years earlier? Why did the shift to coal happen at that time in history instead of another?
You need powerful materials and equipment to mine coal.
Okay, mining is hard work. That's true. Mm-hmm.
So you need really advanced meteorological or metallurgy.
Yeah. Okay. You need good equipment, so when you're digging the coal, you don't just bend your metal and have to give up. Something very specific about coal mining. Coal mining's underground. Gets wet. Pumping technology, just to even get the coal, that was a big part. But then what was the purpose of, what do people do with coal? Why have it? What do you do with it once you get it out of the ground? Do you use it just like wood? You don't just use it to heat your house and cook your food? What made it so useful? Steam engine.
Yeah.
The steam engine. Right. So that also involved being able to machine things precisely enough so that you wouldn't just lose all of the steam, pouring out. Yeah, the steam engine, this new technology, this scientific breakthrough meant that, hey, now coal has become incredibly useful. This isn't just something to keep you warm in the winter. This is something that can power factories instead of wind or water or muscles of man or beast. This is a new source of motion. This rock became motion. Amazing. So what I want to talk about now is, what is that mental process that lets things like that occur? Let's jump ahead to Plato and Aristotle, Jose. Oh, I forgot. I put in a few new things. Okay, go back. There we go. All right. So let's talk about knowing things. So question. What shape is the Earth? What do you think?
Flat.
Okay. Any other hypotheses?
It's a ball.
A ball? Okay.
A pear.
A pear? All right. That's the best you got? Cube? Yeah. So I'll just leave that one hanging. How do we know? How would we answer that question? Here's another one. Does the Earth go around the sun? Anyone care to answer that? Simon says no. Does anyone think the Earth does go around the sun?
I suspect it.
Jose says yes. Does anyone else? I think so. Does anyone? Okay.
Well,
Okay.
You could even ask, what does it mean to say that something goes around something?
Okay. It's true.
Anyway,
So, yeah, that's a very good point. Are you assuming that there's like a fixed space and there's motion versus rest in it? Well, for those who said that the Earth goes around the sun, how do you know?
Day and night?
Day and night?
Night,
Okay, now Simon thinks that the Earth does not go around the sun. So Simon, can you, Pam says day and night proves the Earth goes around the sun.
Spotlight. The sun's a spotlight, and it like shines on different, goes in a circle like this. It's about 32 miles across. It's about 10,000 miles up there. It just kind of goes in a circle.
and you pray to it.
Some people choose to do that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Is it possible that there's some things we think are true that, first up, it might not be, but maybe even more importantly, that we just don't know? Even if we say we know that the Earth goes around the sun, somebody does. The question is, do you? Do you know that? Jump ahead to the geometry and say, please. Here we go. The Pythagorean theorem.
Okay.
A squared plus b squared equals c squared. Does anybody believe that this is true?
Yes, I believe it.
Many people believe. Okay. Who put that belief in your heart?
Pythagoras.
So again, do you know that it's true? How do you know?
I remember doing proofs before.
Do you remember
I've been experimenting some of the numbers and it always worked out.
Okay, if you put numbers in, like how here's an example. So just to say what these symbols mean, let's say that the triangle has sides of 3 and 4 and 5. So let me ask, what is 3 squared?
9,
And 4 squared?
16,
And if you add 9 and 16, you get,
25,
and what is 5 squared?
25.
So is that an example of a proof of it, you think?
It's an example.
It's an example. Now, the trouble with that is, did you take a ruler and measure all 3 sides to make sure 3, 4, and 5 aren't the numbers that we say, but they're actually the sides of the triangle? Sometimes in school, you just put in the numbers. How many triangles would you have to measure this way before you could say this is always true?
About 100.
About 100 for Daniel. Okay, take some convincing. Anybody else have an idea about how many triangles you have to measure before you say, I am certain that a squared plus b squared always equals c squared?
All of them.
All of them. Okay. Simon's very hard to convince. That's why he knows the earth is flat. Okay. Well, that's going to take a long time to measure every single triangle. Is there a way to indirectly measure every single triangle without actually taking, the rest of the universe's existence to do it?
You'd have to prove that it's generally true.
Okay. You got to prove it's true without using any numbers. You have to abstract it. That's why this is written this way. A and B and C, what are they? They're some numbers. They're not specific ones. Now, we're not going to answer this here, but just to give a hint towards how you could solve it. So what is a squared even? If you take a length and you square it, why is it called square?
Square.
Okay. Let's say this is 3. If we made a square here, 3 by 3. A 3 by 3 square has got 9 little squares in it. So this is really a statement about squares. If you put a square here, you put a square down here, and you put a square on the hypotenuse, but the area of these two squares will be the same as that square. Now it's a geometry problem. And now you can try and figure it out. And then I think if that works for you, I think that might be a way of saying, oh, this is actually always true, because I didn't make any assumptions about the sizes. But this isn't what anybody does in school. Or very, very few. You just hear it, you memorize it, you use it. So let's talk about, let's jump ahead now to our two philosophers here. Talk about where knowledge comes from. So this is Plato on the left and Aristotle on the right. This is from Raphael's painting, The School of Athens, where it's a big painting of many, many thinkers from across the ages speaking with each other. Based on the appearance of these two guys, especially if you've never seen this before, and if you want to come up for a closer look, feel free. Any thoughts on any differences between them? Let's start with differences.
Age.
Okay, age. All right, so Plato's older than Aristotle. Okay. What else? What other differences do you see?
Point in different directions.
Pointing different directions. Okay, Plato's pointing up. Aristotle is.
Socrates.
Aristotle.
Oh, no. Is that Socrates or Plato?
This is Plato. Socrates is wearing green. Yeah, so Plato's pointing up. Aristotle is saying, hold on. Any other differences?
Beard length.
Beard length. Yeah, this is quite a beard here.
They're both holding books.
One has a better beard. All right. Which one's better? Do you know who this looks like? Does this face look familiar to you at all?
What did you say?
Da Vinci.
Da Vinci.
It's based on Leonardo da Vinci. Yeah, so Plato looks like da Vinci in Raphael's painting. Okay, any other? Let's see if we can find at least one more difference, maybe two.
One book looks like it's fallen from his hand. The other one's secure.
Okay. Imitate that. So Plato's got his book like this. Aristotle's is. It's like his knee is sticking out here.
Yes, leaning.
What is their shoes?
Plato has no
Well, you're
shoes.
covered.
Okay. That's true. Plato has no shoes. What else? There's something else Plato doesn't have down here that Aristotle does.
Kind of embroidery.
He doesn't have a gold fringed robe. That's true. It looks a little more simply dressed. Doesn't have the fancy sandals and the nice clothes. Also, look at those feet. The sandals are different. What about the way that they're posing? They're seeing.
Plato is mid-stride.
Right. This is like a photograph in the middle of walking. It would be hard to just stand. It would be very awkward. Aristotle, though,
No.
he looks like he might actually be standing still. take a look at it on your own if you see what you think. So these two guys had extremely different views. Let's go ahead and read some quotes. So here's Plato in his Timaeus, talking about how the universe was created. This is both, let's just roughly say 2,000 years ago. For God desired that so far, well, more than 2,000 years ago, before Christ. For God desired that so far as possible, all things should be good and nothing evil. Wherefore, when he took over all that was visible, seeing that it was not in a state of rest, but in a state of discordant and disorderly motion, he brought it into order, out of disorder, deeming that the former state is in all ways better than the latter. And it was good. For him who is most good, it neither was nor is permissible to perform any action save what is most fair. Fair here you can take also mean beautiful. Since God is, for him who is most good, for God couldn't do anything except for what was best. Think about that view of creation.
That's in Timaeus.
Well, hold on, let me go back to what I actually definitely know. I know it's on this slide that I made some years ago, and I feel like I must have made sure it was quoted properly at the time. Okay, next slide. Here is Aristotle talking about the mind and how we learn things. Since, according to common agreement, there is nothing outside and separate in existence from sensible spatial magnitudes, the objects of thought are all in sensible forms. Hence, no one can learn or understand anything in the absence of senses. Is he right? What do you think about this? How does this make you feel?
About that one lady.
Helen Keller? Yeah, look, if you didn't have any senses at all, it would be very hard. But Helen Keller shows that, even missing most of them as she was able to think and write.
What if I don't agree to the common agreement?
What's the common agreement? Oh, there's nothing but senses?
His justification is that it's according to common agreement that
I-
there's nothing outside.
Well, everybody knows that blah, 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 blah. Yeah, this is somebody who's bullshitting you, right?
According to common agreement, I'm the smartest guy in the universe.
Yeah. Is all knowledge and all objects of thought of a sensible form? Do all of your thoughts relate to something you could sense?
What about wisdom?
Well, how about just even in the last slide about Plato, what Plato said about God, where he said that God, being the best, does everything in the most beautiful way, as good as possible. Does that thought look, smell, taste, or sound, or feel like anything? Right. The idea that God did the best possible, it's not really a sensible thought at all. I mean, it's not related to the senses.
Or the infinite, or the infinitesimal, which are also not really able to be sensed.
The infinitesimal, right. You can't see that. Okay, let's go ahead. Let's hear what else this brilliant Aristotle has to say. While in respect of all the other senses, we fall below many species of animals. In respect to touch, we far excel all other species in exactness of discrimination. That is why man is the most intelligent of all animals. What do you think about that?
I think he's been touching himself.
I mean, whenever I hear that, I think that there is actually a truth to that. When you think about craftsmanship, artistry, and other forms of human excellence, I think it's kind of like a tautology. I feel like what he's saying, like what makes human beings great can be, you can trace it back, or if you look at an example of human greatness, like someone playing a piano really amazingly that no other, you could ever imagine any other animal doing it, it involves some kind of extreme dexterity or
Okay, interesting that there might be a kernel of truth to this, and I wouldn't say that there isn't. I mean, I'm not sure how sensitive the fingers of different animals are exactly, but
right.
ours are pretty soft. I mean, we don't walk on them. That's a big help. No, serious. I mean, if you're walking on your hands, they're not going to be they're going to be tough. But is that why man is the most intelligent of all animals? So did that sense of touch, foster and bring about our intelligence?
His definition of touch isn't necessarily our definition of touch. His definition of touch is what he can do with his hands.
Yeah.
We have different definition of touch now.
Could be.
Touch means I could touch something with my ear.
Well, I mean,
it's hot. Back up.
he might have touched things with his ear too. I don't know if we're the first to.
But I mean, that ends up being kind of the really commonplace idea that like what makes humans different is like we have a big brain and we have like opposable thumbs, so we can like use our hands to do stuff.
Simon,
So we can build tools and stuff.
you've teed me up. Let's take a look at the next slide, Jose.
Yeah.
What is this creature?
It's a koala.
Koala. Take a look at his hands.
Oh,
See anything?
Opposable
Opposable
Oh my
thumbs.
God.
Yes. So it's not. Yeah. So I don't know if touch is what makes us so brilliant. We've got. I don't think koalas are considered exactly nature's greatest creation besides us. They got
Every source
opposable
of food
thumbs.
is poisonous to them.
Really?
Eucalyptus.
How many words can you write?
How many words can they write? I don't know. They're too busy eating all day to try to survive. Okay, a little.
Sorry, I don't know. Just go ahead.
Okay, a little bit more from Aristotle. So let's bear with this. All instruction given or received by way of argument proceeds from pre-existing knowledge. We have already said that scientific knowledge through demonstration is impossible unless a man know the primary immediate premises. How does man know? Okay. Any thoughts before we go to the next slide on this? Saw some scowls here. Put into words. What do you think about this? Is this true? All instruction by our way of argument proceeds from pre-existing knowledge.
I guess it depends what you mean by pre-existing knowledge, right?
Okay. Oh, I mean, like, where did the pre-existing knowledge come from?
Yeah.
Or if you keep chasing it back, what's there? What's at the beginning?
Well, and also, you could almost use that sentence as a way of describing like Platonic recollection, pre-existing knowledge being like the recollection of
Okay.
a
Yes.
thought
Yes.
idea.
I hear you.
So
That wasn't the way I took his meaning, but that's something to think about. Because he's saying all instruction given or received by way of argument. So, what?
I feel like sorry, you should go ahead.
Well, what I'm hearing from this, and let me know what you think, is that he's saying that by way of argument, like logic. Like if you're trying to convince somebody, you have to start with something that you agree with. Like your just common belief that Angela pointed out, and then you make, and then you use the things that everybody agrees on, and you try to come to a conclusion from it.
Oh, that's a computer, right?
That's logic. Let's look at the next slide.
okay.
So now this is also from the same paper. He says, our sense perception comes to be what we call memory. And out of frequently repeated memories of the same things develops experience. For a number of memories constitute a single experience. From experience originates the knowledge of the man of science. From experience originates the knowledge of the man of science. Is he right? he partly right?
You might be partly right, maybe.
I mean,
Well, he's definitely partly right.
okay, you do need to actually see things. That's a big help for knowing things, yes. Seeing the world around you.
But it's like the same thing. You can never experience an infinite thing or an infinitesimal thing or God or
There you
any of
go.
these other things.
Right.
But you can still imagine them and postulate about them and do all these other things. So
Well, then the question is does knowledge exist apart from experience? Is knowledge simply come to exist through experience, or is it pre-existing and then we access it through experience?
Okay. And then what are these things that we're accessing? Like what form? For example, that earlier statement Plato had made, that God did things extremely well because he is the greatest. So why would he not? We certainly don't experience, God creating the universe. That's not an experience that then Plato would think that he had firsthand. How could he come to a conclusion like that? Where did that thought come from? The Pythagorean theorem, for example. Maybe posteriori comes from the chat here. Yeah, so posteriori meaning that, well, actually just wrote one word. If you'd like to, well, it's hard to have a conversation through these little bubbles. All right, we'll see if maybe more will come from that. Okay, let's go to let's take off the slide. So thinking back to the Pythagorean theorem, when you experience enough triangles, do you know it? You might go with that if you say, well, I'm gonna use it. This seems to be good enough, I'm gonna use it to build something. It might work out. But it's a different kind of knowledge than when you make the squares and know it for sure. The Earth going around the sun. Kepler did not experience a special way of using his senses or his fingers anything about the Earth going around the sun. And as Adrian hinted at, even that idea of what it would mean to go around the sun. It's different if the sun's making the Earth move, if the Earth is moving around something and the sun happens to be just sitting in the middle, but even if we remove the sun, the Earth would keep going in a circle anyway. So even saying the Earth goes around the sun, what do you mean exactly? All right, let's pull up the next picture. Wrapping up soon here. So how about, can we just ignore all of this and let AI figure it out for us? No, people really are, I guess the buzz is over, huh? So one of the troubles with AI, well, what are some of the troubles with AI? Like if you've used ChatGPT or Grok or whatever, what problems do you run into?
I mean, trying to get some answers on not only supplies, but maybe you have some outage of some service, and you try to talk to AI bot, and you ask question A, and it gives you the answer to question C.
It's maddening for those like customer service things.
It's inefficient.
They're horrible. They waste a lot of human time, but it's your time, not the company's time. So
Right.
they're okay with that. Yeah, they waste your time. All right. What
Designed to
else?
make you give up, I think.
What's that?
It's designed to make you give
Oh.
up.
Yeah.
And
Sure.
choose someone else's goods.
Yeah. What else? What other problems do you run into?
It's much more efficient at producing falsehoods than
Okay, it produces. So you say you've gotten falsehoods out of ChatGPT or something like that?
Well, I hear that the Russians are going to overthrow our elections this fall.
AI bots.
No, it
Serves us
I
right
was talking
now.
about ChatGPT, not ChatCNN. Yeah. Okay, you can
Well,
get,
yeah, I've heard that it creates, interpolates falsehoods.
there's even a word for that. What's the word that people use when the AI thing makes up something that's just not real?
Well, I haven't heard of that.
What do we call it if a person sees something that isn't there?
Oh, yeah, they say hallucinations.
Hallucinations. Yeah, that's the word. They say, look, we're trying to make sure this AI thing does less hallucinating.
Well, because it's what the language model actually does is produces something that resembles human language, right?
It makes something that looks like what might be an answer to what looked like your question. So it's not thinking, that's for sure. Let's take an example. Oh, I didn't set this up right. Let's take a look at the next picture. Okay. What do you think about this one?
AI.
Okay, how do you know?
You can just tell.
Okay, let's get specific.
Fingers are weird.
No, they're weird.
Okay, that was okay. So my prompt was a happy person with their hand. I was like, let me bring out the hands, because the hands you can tell. Okay, what's weird here? Is this a new anatomical feature? Does this woman have a new bone? Does she have a blister? What is that?
Oh, yeah.
Thumb's not really making sense.
Like E.T.
Well, what actually makes this obviously AI?
Oh, you're asking?
Yes.
I mean, you could imagine, well, yeah, for me, it's the hands, but everything else you could imagine, like enough Photoshop could get a photo to look like that.
There's some things you wouldn't expect on a real person. For example, take a look at her pockets. This pocket is this tall. This pocket is I mean, you could wear an asymmetrical jacket, but
Yeah, the
Probably
pockets
not.
are like, they're not the right size. Like that one on the right is just like way too big.
okay. And then,
The background as well looks a little weird. The lines don't match up and stuff.
that's true. It looks like they don't match up from the
They're
top
like
and the bottom.
sizes, they don't match up and down. Yeah.
What about, so let's look back at her clothes. The face? Yeah, face looks a little weird. Just to do
Mouth
something,
is too big.
it's big. To do something easier, take a look at her coat. There's something else wrong with her coat.
Is it the buttons or something?
The buttons are all messed up. Okay, they're weirdly bunched up here, so they're irregularly spaced, and there's a huge gap. This looks like a buttonhole. There's no buttonholes here, so I mean, you couldn't button this jacket. Okay, I mean, again, it could have been a real coat, but it'd be unlikely that you would buy this useless coat that can't keep you warm. Right. So, but it looks like a picture. It resembles visually. If you look at each, small piece of it, it resembles an actual image of a human being. But, it's just not right. So here's the big question about hallucinations. I want to end with this, and we can talk about some things. Let's say you're asking about triangles, and ChatGPT tells you that a squared plus b squared equals c squared on right triangles. You might say that's not a hallucination, if that's actually true. But here's the big question. How do you know whether the AI is hallucinating or not?
You have to know.
You got to bring your own knowledge to the table. So no matter, and you can't outsource that. You can't outsource to authorities knowing anything. Certainly not a computer. Here, let me read something from New York.
I don't know, I just, like, you say you can't outsource anything to authorities, but like, we do need
But
to,
realistically, don't you?
we can't all like have PhDs in molecular biology whenever there's a new like pharmaceutical product or something. So where does that leave us?
No, it's true. So what it leads us to, I think, sometimes is recognizing we're not competent to render judgments. I mean, that's one thing. That's one of the weird things about politics. Like, or actually, it's become that way kind of in a lot of other fields too. But let's say like electronics. Let's say there's not a lot of people that'll just say that they've got their own opinions about how electricity works, and they're going to rewire their home on their own or something like that. That's unlikely. When it comes to politics, everybody feels like they've got an opinion because they're asked to vote, right, on a regular basis. But sometimes you just shouldn't have, I don't know, that's one part of the response, I guess. Also, let's be honest, you can sort of, let's come back to that. That's really good. this is a New York Times article, so hallucination probably. U.S. investigating Americans who work with Russian state television. This is their report on the raids of the homes of Scott Ritter and Dmitry Simes, or Simmons, however you say his name. They assure us the government, it says that, these horrible people were, Scott Ritter was, being paid by RT to write articles, and therefore he's an agent of the Russians. So, the government investigation is not targeting ordinary Americans who watch Russian state media or post about it online, but rather is focused on individuals intentionally spreading disinformation from Moscow. So it's not about ordinary Americans who watch Russian state media or post about it online, but on individuals intentionally spreading disinformation from Moscow. What does that mean, intentionally spreading disinformation?
Speech.
Okay. Because we're not looking at people who watch Russian media or post about it online, but only at individuals talking.
I love how they're so clever how they write, because like they don't actually directly accuse Scott Ritter of spreading disinformation, because that could be potentially libelous. So they just say the inquiry is focused on, and then they,
Right.
yeah.
Oh yeah, and then the way they ended the article is like crescendo, and then it's like his own words saying like, yeah, well, because the way he speaks is like very clear. It's either this article or the other one, and he says like, yeah, well, basically, they think that I'm spreading state, like Russian state propaganda, and they leave that as the last sentence of the story.
Yeah,
it's like, so
here's the end quote. They believe somehow I am actively conspiring with Russia against the interests of the United States, that I have become more than just a propagandist, that I have become something more like, a weapon of disinformation. Yeah. And the article.
like,
We gave him the last word. Yeah.
It's just so fucking obvious.
So what, I'm really curious, intentionally spreading disinformation. Let's try to be charitable with this phrase.
I was just going to comment the wonderful invention of the word disinformation, because then if you that does not, you can intentionally spread disinformation without knowing that it is disinformation.
Like tuberculosis or something. Absolutely.
But therefore you can be culpable, even, according to this extremely vague term, even if you don't know it's false, because you're spreading disinformation.
Right. You're intentionally spreading disinformation means you're saying things that we don't want you to. Is there any other meaning to those words? Really?
Well, it's kind of, I feel like it's sufficiently vague, like you're saying, and it has an implied meaning, which is that you're lying on behalf of somebody. But what it literally means is what you're saying, right? and it functions simultaneously.
Yeah, because what's Ritter going to say? He obviously doesn't think he thinks he's saying what he believes. So he doesn't consider disinformation. So who gets to make that kind of call?
Truth Bureau, or whatever.
The Truth Bureau.
Misinformation Bureau.
Ministry of Truth.
Ministry of Truth.
Maybe we can let Grok decide. So that's where I wanted to end that for today. Talk about all this, and I just mentioned for next week, Daniel's going to be taking us on a world tour of the. Can we put up the first slide again, Jose? There we go. A tour of the World Land Bridge. So this is something that the LaRouche movement has put together. It looks similar to the Belt and Road Initiative, but this was first. And it is something you'll be hearing about next week, so I'm not going to say much more. Yeah. Development projects are all over the place.
It's disinformation.
Disinformation.
It's going to be a brilliant class on disinformation.
Right. Daniel's going to be intentionally spreading it. What was that thing that you said earlier? That was...
Oh, about the
You can't be an authority. You have to trust
You have to trust
authorities.
authorities.
Oh, yeah. Well, do you?
Yeah, because, well, you said like, we're asked to have opinions about everything because we're asked to vote every once in a while. But in reality, we just shouldn't have, there are things we shouldn't have opinions or shouldn't come to conclusions about if we're not in a place to conclude. But there are some things where you can't really, if somebody says, hey, you should, do this, you should get 8 hours of sleep a day because that's good for your health, you're either going to do that or not. You can't, well, I'm going to sit this one out. Like, you can't really do that.
Yeah.
So you have to make some decision.
This person's choking. I'm not sure what to do. See ya. Yeah, you're right.
But I think, do you have more slides or can I join the discussion?
No, that's it.
Okay, great. I think you take the vaccine issue. A lot of people were not trusting of people like Fauci and the entire health department, and we're on YouTube, but I don't care. And do people have the time or the capacity to read through papers of mountains of research data? I mean, they kind of just have to take the word of public health officials who would seem to know what they're talking about, right? Like, we would want to trust in doctors, right? But let's just say they're not even being malicious.
But they're spreading disinformation.
I don't know.
Well, it's another example of where you do have to, you can't, it wasn't something to sit out. I mean, at a certain point you say, well, am I going to do this or not? Like, you do have to make a choice. And so I see, yeah, that's another example when you do have to actually make a choice of what you're going to do.
I mean, that's why I turn on CNN to know who to vote for.
I think the most important thing, and this is something I think we're going to be, getting into over time, and our some of our other work is working on developing that a sense of judgment, specifically by going back to there's been wonderful discoveries made in the past, incredible things. Calculus was developed. Mendeleev, figured out the periodic system of the elements. Einstein figured out relativity, created it as a new idea. We got all these wonderful gems that we can come to know, that we can work on, we can understand. So I think sort of like as a kind of sidestepping the question, but also just saying like, okay, well, what do you do to improve your ability to figure things out and start, and if you use things from the, if you use these great things from the past, they're available. You don't have to start from, ground zero of yourself, like the Earth thing, right? Okay, Eratosthenes, more than 2,000 years ago, figured out the Earth is round and how big it is. Everybody just did that in school. You could call up another school, get on Zoom, and you two schools could measure the size of the Earth by looking at shadows outside. I mean, you can do that nowadays.
But I mean, the question is, because it's an issue of specialization, right? Like, how many great discoveries can you kind of walk yourself through and discover for yourself before you're ready to tackle the issue of like vaccines, like the COVID thing, or
just anything,
any number of other, let's say it again,
or just like anything.
Yeah, exactly. Any other complex specific issue that's built on like this mountain of like peer-reviewed literature and this whole paradigm of peer review.
Well, you can do what you think is right while recognizing that you might revisit your thoughts, that you're still thinking about it. I mean, if you're organizing and you're talking to people about where the world should go, I mean, do you know everything about the world? No. But, are you saying what you believe is true, and from a place of being willing and able to talk through with people in a Socratic way and engage with their minds and think through it together, and maybe you'll both come to some new thought that neither of you had.
I think the other part of it is that there's the means by which we come to know anything is the mind. And so the encountering of other minds from history, like you're talking about, is something that allows you to come to understand the principle of your own mind. And then you have an image of man, and then you have a principle by which you can order your action. That's how I think about it. And then things will follow from that, which will be, each of them momentous in their own way. But without that foundation, you don't have it.
Good point. These are people. Well, one of the things I'm taking from it is like, oh yeah, these are people that made these discoveries, right? It's not just looking at the earth, we're looking at how did a human being like me think about this problem.
I want to throw out a hypothesis. Like when it comes to your health, I think that if you're making a tough decision, a decision that you don't know what to do, a good rule of thumb for me is that you should have some kind of expectation of, okay, I'm going to make this decision and this is going to happen. Or here's what I hope to accomplish. I'm going to sleep more and then I'm going to feel better in the morning, etc. But I mean, obviously, if you're talking about a preventative treatment, a preventative medical procedure, it's harder because you're like, I'm not sick now and I'm going to continue to not be sick. And so then you have to consider what happens to the people around you and the population in aggregate, and that's more difficult to do.
It is, and it's a lot. I mean, like let's say cholesterol pills, alopecia. No individual person knows if these things have helped them. I mean, you can measure cholesterol level, but did your body just do this on its own? Did your hair change on its? You don't know, and so you sort of have to look at. I agree. It's a big difference between things like you can look at yourself. I'm going to sleep more. I feel better versus like something that you might not see any effects, and you have to look at lots of people to figure out. Yeah.
But I would say there's still the principle of having an expectation. If you say, there's way more people dying this year than last year, so we're going to give people a vaccine. What do we expect to happen in the future? What after we give everybody this vaccine, how do we expect the mortality rate to change? So you have some principle of having an expectation, and then you can at least go back in the future and say, how does our expectation compare to what happened? To me, that idea is very broadly applicable. What is our expectation? What is,
Yeah. Yeah, like really making a hypothesis, like this is how I think the future. Anyway, yeah.
Yeah. Otherwise, how can you tell if any medical treatment is any good?
Yeah. Any other questions? Should we just wrap up?
Should all go to sleep? Get 10 hours.
Okay. All right. Well, as usual, thank you all for coming. Thank you all for tuning in. We don't have a end card, so
You say that every